I'm Mike.
I'm Jason.
Welcome to Snake Envy. So this is going to be our second video with Summer Stevenson of Summer Snakes. Thank you for having us. Appreciate it. Good chance to come here, check out her collection. For this topic, we're going to talk a little bit about trends and kind of what becomes the norm in the hobby. And from your perspectives as breeders, is there something that you do that you're successful with that wouldn't be considered trendy or maybe wouldn't be considered normal? And then my perspective from a hobbyist. But we'll start with you, Summer, as a breeder. Is there something you do in your breeder operation that a lot of people might think is a little crazy or kind of defies a current trend in the hobby?
Ooh, I know I definitely do things differently than a lot of other people.
Well, we were talking earlier, your situation's a little different. We're old guys, you're young, but you grew up learning from your parents who probably have some older school methods.
Mentors.
Yeah, great, fantastic mentors, and I think that's amazing. That's how people should learn in the hobby, is from somebody who comes before. But so it could be you're doing old school things that.
No, that's true. Yeah.
Even though you're a little younger, yeah.
It's hard to name something really specific, I guess. But even like a lot of people, this is something I just don't do. But like they weigh their food items before they feed it. And like I do not do that. I look at the food item, I look at the snake, I'm like,
Yes.
oh yeah, you can pound that. And I feed them. Like so many people are like,
That's
well,
a good one.
That is
it's
a
like,
good one.
okay, do you think a 30-gram,
Right.
mouse is gonna be okay? Like, well, how does it look? Like, does it look okay? I don't know. For me, I get that question a lot actually, and I'm always like, just compare and then see if it looks appropriate.
The widest part of the snake.
Yeah, it's like, all right, well,
That's actually a really good one. I don't know where that one came from, but even as hobbyists and pet owners, that's a popular one now too.
Yeah, it is.
Now I get it. Some people's personalities are just very, data driven.
Yes,
and
definitely.
you have to be able to measure everything, and that's how you know it's right. But we can definitely reassure people that there's no need to do that.
No, you really don't need to weigh the food item.
No. How often do you even weigh a snake? Honestly, as
Not
breeders.
often. No,
I
really
don't even have a scale.
Yeah.
I get the same, like, that brings up something that I was thinking, a great thought is, I get asked all the time, well, what size, what weight do you breed your snakes at? I'm like,
Oh, yeah.
I don't weigh anything, I just look at it, yes, it's ready.
Yeah.
It's obvious.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. And some of that comes from experience, but some of that is just common sense.
Yeah.
And, some of it has to do with age. You're probably not even looking, like the first 2 years. You're not even.
No.
But then come year 3, you're like, okay, let me take a look and see if
Yeah,
you're
my
ready.
minimum's usually 3 years, unless they're like a monster.
Yeah.
Then maybe, but.
So Wayne, that is a great one. And that is one that not only breeders are doing, that has spilled into the hobby at large.
It was really started, I felt like the weighing of snakes started out with mostly ball pythons. I felt like it was a ball python, and then it's a hognose thing, and I just I don't even own a scale, so
I have a scale, and honestly, I've been keeping snakes now for about 40 years, and the only time I have ever weighed a snake is if there was a concern about their health,
Sure.
and just making sure that they weren't losing weight. But that's it. I've never weighed snakes just to know what they weigh, or...
Just colubris in general, I don't ever see a reason to really weigh them, but...
How about you, Jason, as a breeder? What's something you're doing that's, some people would say you're nuts?
I got a couple of them. One of mine is hatchlings. Like, it's hatched, it's been 10 days, it's shed, it's got to eat right away. And, I tend to wait a couple weeks a lot of times. That egg yolk will stick with them for weeks, and And it's like, well, it didn't eat. It's like, well, it's not hungry yet.
Right.
So and there's certain people think I'm a little nuts with this one is with some of my Mountain Kings and Mexicana. They'll hatch, and I won't even attempt to give them food for a couple months with those tricky feeders.
Oh yeah.
And like it works amazing with like their like I'll let them not starve, but go a couple months, and then I'll feed them live, and I usually get like 60% to go first try, and that's not, the norm.
Yeah, that's not.
And that saves you a lot of wasted prey.
Well, and it's
Yeah.
and people that keep trying and that mouse is in there all the time, and they get used to having a mouse in their cage or a pinky or whatever, and so
They don't see it as food.
Yeah.
It's a roommate.
It's the roommate, yeah.
exactly.
It's interesting too because from a common sense perspective, we're always taught as hobbyists when you get a new snake, you want to leave it alone for a week or two. And don't try to handle it. Don't try to feed it. And you're on kind of a similar mindset that just let it settle in and get used to being alive and then try to feed it. Did you have another one? I think you said you had two.
I did, but I forgot about it.
Well, we've talked about you with temperatures. Your temperatures that you incubate at and that they tend to be lower than what's common.
Yeah, I'm definitely different than most people on temperatures and incubation even.
And you have told us both that you don't worry about the shed cycle when it comes to pairing snakes coming out of rumination.
And a lot of people like, oh, it hasn't shed yet. I had a friend yesterday, an experienced guy, been doing it longer than I have, but he was asking, well, she hasn't shed yet, and I'm like, don't wait, because sometimes a snake will go into its shed cycle for months after being warmed up, and then you can miss an ovulation that way.
Yeah.
And so that's one thing I know, like the species I work with, I know what kind of time frames they'll go into ovulation, so I just pair them. I don't wait for a shed cycle. I'm more of a time frame on that stuff.
So as a hobbyist, I would say the biggest trend in the hobby right now is clutter. Highly cluttered enclosures. And all you have to do is say the word clutter and everybody knows what you're talking about. It's just piles of stuff in the enclosure for the snakes to hide in. And I would say to the younger people in the hobby, you didn't invent this one. This is one of those trends that, we were doing 20 plus years ago and it went away and now it's kind of come back again. And I would also say a lot of these enclosures are beautiful. I compliment people on them all the time. I want nothing to do with them, but some of them look amazing. But there's two reasons I don't do it. One, maintaining and cleaning those enclosures is a lot more difficult than a little more minimal enclosure. And it wasn't uncommon when I was keeping enclosures like that you'd be doing your enclosure clean out and you find this poop buried, 4 levels in and you're like, oh my gosh, how long has that thing been there? So I definitely think enclosures are cleaner and better maintained when there's less in them. I would also say I am in no way, shape, or form saying that snakes don't need hides. Absolutely they do. So I'm not suggesting, just a bare hide. Or a bare enclosure. I also think it's important to emphasize that we should try to stimulate some of the natural behaviors in our snakes. And we all keep colubrids that are burrowers. So all my snakes have deep substrate. And they tunnel. One of my favorite things is seeing tunnel openings and seeing them periscoping out of the substrate. I love that because that's part of their natural behavior. And if you think about it, that deep substrate is one giant hide. So if a snake wants to hide, it can definitely hide. I don't see why you have to have 4 more layers of hide on top of that in addition to designated hides. But the second thing I would say, the reason I don't do this is I think you get what you give in terms of a snake's personality. And I like the word confidence. I keep my snakes on display. They're in my office where I work every day. I want to see them. I don't have display terrariums. I have display snakes, and I like to see them out and about.
And as a hobbyist, I see that. Like you wanna see and enjoy your animal.
Yeah, and I think you get what you give. There's no question that in the wild, snakes hide and are reclusive for very good reason. They're either trying to get out of extreme weather or they're trying to avoid predators. But in captivity, neither of those two things is a worry. And I personally, in my experience, if you let snakes get used to the environment around them and the human activity around them, they adjust to that, they get comfortable with that, and you end up with a more confident snake. One of my favorite things is on social media is where somebody says, I never see my snake, but he was out today, so I had to get a picture. And the picture is a blurry picture of just its head that was sticking out, of all the clutter. And it's like, wow, congrats, you saw his head. And I think the reason the photo's blurry is probably the second they approached, he was trying to duck back in. And so I don't want snakes that are skittish. I don't want snakes that are kind of naturally afraid. I want them to be confident that they're safe, confident that I'm safe. When I walk into my snake room, they don't go scurrying, for cover. They don't act startled. They just do what they were doing. And if you approach their enclosures, they're more likely to come towards you rather than trying to get away. So I describe that as confident. The snakes are confident. They know that they're safe. They're even used to my dogs. If the dogs come in the room, the dogs want nothing to do with the snakes, but you can see the snakes, wanting to check out the dogs. They're used to it. They're confident in their surroundings. And so those are the two reasons I don't do the clutter. Keep it cleaner, have more confident and more visible snakes. I think that's what it's all about. So we appreciate your time. Thank you. We're going to go check out some animals and see what Summer's got going on this year. Thank you.
Thanks.